Hello everyone, and welcome to the Tome of Silver, the show where I randomly select a game from my collection, review it, and add it to an ever-growing ranking list. Horror in space is an incredibly scary concept in and of itself. The idea of being trapped on a ship with a strange creature that defies imagination, while being far, possibly light years away from help, is one that naturally instills both the feeling of fear and isolation. It's for that reason that films such as the original Alien or Event Horizon have gained such popularity. Such a concept has great potential, even more so in the world of video games, where the medium has the ability to immerse a player and make them feel just as involved in a situation as the character they're playing as. Hoping to do exactly that, an individual by the name of Glen Schofield created the concept of Dead Space, drawing inspiration from successful horror contemporaries such as Silent Hill and Resident Evil, specifically Resident Evil 4. In 2008, Dead Space would be released to great acclaim, and is often considered one of the best in sci-fi horror. Hell, it's described as being one of the best in horror period when it comes to video games. And that's certainly a big claim, but how much merit does it truly hold 14 years after the game's initial release? Put on your rig, grab the world's coolest mining gear, and let's turn the page to Dead Space for the Xbox 360. Dead Space takes place in the year 2508, where we don the helmet of Isaac Clarke, an engineer sent with an emergency response team to respond to the distress signal of the R.I.G. Ishimura, a ship created for the purpose of mining and smelting entire planets for resources. The ship has undergone an entire communications blackout, and any attempts to hail it have been met with static. We also find out that Nicole, Isaac's girlfriend, is a crew member aboard the Ishimura, which naturally has Isaac concerned for her safety. However, as the response team attempts to land, a docking malfunction causes their ship to take major damage, making it unlikely that they'll be able to leave anytime soon. The team proceeds with their mission, entering the quiet halls of the Ishimura without a single person in sight. However, as the crew attempts to restore power, they are suddenly attacked by these strange, horrifying creatures, splitting up Isaac from the rest of the crew. Alone, it's up to Isaac to do what he can to find a way off the Ishimura, and hopefully find Nicole. The R.I.G. Ishimura makes for an incredibly unnerving setting, with the calm quiet of the Ishimura only being broken by the movement of the ship's various functions. Dead Space does a magnificent job in keeping the player on edge as they make their way through the Ishimura. Dead Space also boasts some very impressive lighting to help build that atmosphere, and that leads to one of Dead Space's greatest visual strengths. Dead Space still looks amazing to this day, despite being released 14 years ago, and from what I can tell, this was done through the game's incredible use of lighting and shadows. Any textures or visuals that would look otherwise muddy or undetailed are cleverly disguised in darkness, while things that the player will see are polished to a near sheen. Things like Isaac's suit are impressively rendered, having details like the little clumps of lint on the unarmored parts to make things really stand out. Of course, all these features help the atmosphere, but none of these would be even half as effective without Dead Space's brilliant use of a heads-up display, or rather its lack thereof. Heads-up displays serve the purpose of displaying information to the player, such as health, remaining ammo, maybe a map to help navigate around the area, etc. It's definitely a very video gamey element, which doesn't do much to get a player immersed in a game. However, Dead Space removes the need for a heads-up display while still showing the player critical information. Isaac's health bar is represented by the neon blue bar going down the spine of his suit, which will lower and change color the more hurt Isaac becomes. This idea is simple, but it does so much. The blue bar meshes well with the rest of the neon aspects of Isaac's suit, while still always being front and center for the player to have an eye on. Ammo is also visible by a small screen that only pulls up when you're aiming. The game shows essential information in a way that feels part of Dead Space's world, and without an immersion-breaking inclusion like a heads-up display, it allows the player to get much more absorbed into the game, which in turn makes the game's horror feel all the more real. Walking through the dimly lit halls won't be the only thing Isaac will need to confront on his journey, as he'll be faced with swarms of the monsters he encountered before, Necromorphs. When Dead Space first released, the common expectation with shooters was you always wanted to try and get headshots on enemies. Whether they were humans or zombies, a proper shot to the head was usually enough to put a foe into the ground. Dead Space, however, takes a much more unique approach. Shooting a Necromorph in the head or body does very limited damage, and even if you manage to take off a Necromorph's head, it's unlikely to bring them down. Shooting and removing a Necromorph's limbs, however, does critical damage, and as such, learning how to strategically take off as many limbs as possible with as few shots should be your first priority. Dead Space offers a really strong selection of enemy types, each which have a unique way of attacking and needing to be defeated, so I never found myself getting bored. The Necromorphs also have some really great designs. The standard Necromorph alone looks scary, with its long, bladed limbs which bend unnaturally. Even the way the Necromorphs move are unnerving, either with their walk as they skulk towards you, or the feeling of terror I felt when one of these things broke out into a sprint. I especially like the Divider, which you usually hear moaning throughout the ship before actually encountering one. Then when you did see it, it's abnormally tall, and slowly slinks towards you with the same unsettling moan, before you shoot it enough times and it breaks apart into several different limbs, all of which come at you at once and try and overwhelm you. It's such a brilliant design for a monster. The Necromorphs are some of my all-time favorite enemies in horror games. Few horror games I feel have enemies that continuously scare me throughout the whole game, while still being fun to fight. Just as the fear of a certain Necromorph type started to lose its effectiveness, the game adds something new to reignite that spice of terror. And the combat remains fun through each of these Necromorphs having unique mechanics, as well as Dead Space's unique gimmick of wanting to aim for the limbs. Shooting feels immensely satisfying in Dead Space. Each firearm has great impact, complemented by the limbs of Necromorphs exploding off their bodies after sustaining enough hits. Thankfully, the Necromorphs don't feel like bullet sponges either. With precise aiming and focusing on particular limbs, you can take out a Necromorph in just a couple hits. Isaac does have some melee attacks he can use as well, but they're highly meant to be used as a last resort. Isaac does not attack with much grace, and they do very little damage. Really, the only reason why it's there is to make sure you have some means to defend yourself if you run out of ammo, or to attack something that could otherwise waste a bullet. Isaac can also perform a stomp attack, which is much more useful. Taking out an enemy's leg will force them to crawl towards you, giving you an opportunity to stomp. Isaac's stomp is incredibly strong, dealing enough damage as about a shot from your standard plasma cutter, so you can use this to take out an enemy and save some of your precious ammo. The stomp isn't free, however. Some Necromorphs can still be quick enough to get a few hits in on you while you are trying to stomp them. So it gives a nice choice between whether it's worth risking trying to stomp, or if you play it safe and use one of your limited shots. Something that concerned me at first was whenever I entered combat with an enemy, loud, tense music would start up and would only stop once an enemy was defeated. My fear was that I would always know if an enemy was in the room with me or not, depending on whether the music was still playing, thus removing the possibility of Necromorphs being able to get the jump on me. This fear was instantly washed away the second I figured out how the music in the game actually worked. The tense battle music will only start up if you see an enemy, not when an enemy first arrives in a room. So if I see one Necromorph, but I don't see another behind me, the music will stop once the Necromorph in front of me goes down. It won't start up again until I turn and physically see the other Necromorph, thus allowing Necromorphs to still get the jump on me and prevent me from letting my guard down once the music stops playing. This was an excellent feature. It allows the music to still be there without sacrificing the tension of what may still be lurking around the corner in a given room. On his journey, Isaac gets a number of other handy tools to use: stasis and kinesis. Stasis allows Isaac to fire a small blast, which causes whatever it hits to slow down tremendously. Kinesis, on the other hand, allows Isaac to lift up or drag various objects, even allowing him to fire some objects as a projectile. You'll often be making use of these abilities in the game's various puzzles, all of which I thought were excellent. Each puzzle makes clever use of these abilities, and they all felt rather satisfying to complete. I especially like the ones that took place in zero gravity, needing Isaac to jump from wall to maneuver around, and solve puzzles from various angles. Stasis and kinesis aren't just used for puzzles, however. Stasis works on Necromorphs as well, slowing them down to a crawl and allowing you a number of opportunities. For example, you can hit an enemy with stasis and use that opportunity to hit as many limbs as you can while they're immobile. Or if you find yourself in a situation where you're being overwhelmed with Necromorphs, you can hit one with stasis to render them less of a threat for a few moments while you deal with a different one. You have a limited amount of stasis you can use, however, as shown by the blue wheel on Isaac's back, making it just as important that you carefully consider when it's best to use, lest you find yourself in a much more dire situation without it. Kinesis, on the other hand, is a bit more limited, but it allows you to pick up objects and throw them at enemies. Most objects will just momentarily stun the Necros, but if you find explosives around, making proper use of it can effectively take out an enemy and possibly save you a number of bullets. Both of these abilities are so fun to use. Slowing an enemy and effortlessly taking them out, or taking out a large group of monsters with a well-thrown explosive was never not satisfying, and players can get really creative in their use to preserve their resources. It's awesome. Speaking of resources, that's definitely where I feel most of Dead Space's challenge comes from. After a bit of practice, removing the necessary limbs from Necromorphs with surgical precision will become second nature. However, Isaac has a limited inventory space, and you'll be unlikely to hold every item you come across. As such, the player will often need to make a decision as to what they think they should hang on to and what they should toss out. Taking too many healing items means you may not have enough ammo to properly defend yourself, but taking too much ammo means you may not have enough healing supplies to keep you alive for moments where you get too careless. I recall an instance where I encountered a store, and used all my available credits to purchase the newest suit upgrade for Isaac. However, this left me with virtually no credits to buy any healing items, and I didn't have any on me at the time. That said, I felt confident I would find more along the way. I was wrong. During the following sequence, I got careless and lost essentially all of my health, and for the remainder of the level, I had plenty of ammo, but essentially had to perform perfectly to avoid getting another scratch for the remainder of the stage. And let me be clear, I am not saying this is a weakness of the game. On the contrary, I believe it's a strength. Limited resources encourages careful play, which fits well with the survival horror genre. And if you don't have a proper balance between your resources, the level of challenge remains the same, but exactly what challenge you face will be different. Having too little healing items and too much ammo leads to situations like I was in, requiring proper use of ammo to avoid getting hit. Having more healing items than ammo, however, means you'll need to be more precise with each shot, and make proper use of kinesis and stomps to conserve whatever ammo you can. The limited resources kept things feeling properly tense, and at no point did it ever feel like an unstoppable arsenal, keeping the horror element alive and well throughout my experience. For most of the game, the story takes a bit of a backseat to the gameplay, more often just being your teammates contacting you saying something is wrong on a part of a ship, and it's up to Isaac to find a way to fix it. To add some intrigue, Dead Space has text and audio logs scattered about the Ishimura, which details various accounts and experiences of the other members of the crew. Usually, audio logs in horror games never interested me all too much, as they usually just evolve into the same "people are dying and I'm scared" camp, which makes them kind of bleed together. Dead Space does certainly have those, but thankfully it has others that were actually rather interesting. Some detail scientists' discoveries on the nature of what the Necromorphs are, while others flesh out Dead Space's world, such as the ones with unitologists, fanatics who believe that Necromorphs grant people the ability to ascend to a higher plane of existence. These audiologs were fascinating, and kept me intrigued whenever the story wasn't at the forefront. The story does pick up near the end of the game, and there is a particular detail that I would like to discuss, which does include spoilers. As such, if you want to avoid spoilers for Dead Space, skip to the timestamp shown on screen. Okay, going into spoilers in 3, 2, 1. During the game, we see Nicole multiple times, through transmissions and a few times in person. This is revealed to have been just hallucinations, caused by dementia created by the Marker, an artifact picked up from the planet the Ishimura is currently above. As we reach the conclusion of the game, it's revealed to us that Nicole, the person Isaac has spent all game searching for, has been dead this whole time. The video Nicole sent to Isaac at the beginning of the game shows her committing suicide after losing hope as the Ishimura is overrun. Isaac, however, could never bring himself to watch to the end of the video, knowing deep down that Nicole is dead, but deluding himself into believing she may still be alive. On one hand, the reveal of Nicole being dead is not particularly surprising, and rather telegraphed. It becomes apparent that everyone else you encounter suffering from dementia only sees hallucinations of those who are already dead. This is not to mention that every encounter with Nicole is particularly bizarre, especially the transmissions we receive from her over the course of the game. And of course, the cherry on top is the well-known secret that the first letter of each of the game's chapters just plain spells it out for you. But all that said, I still like the reveal. We can tell by the way Nicole speaks to Isaac, and Isaac's insistence of holding out hope, that the two really did love each other. You can't help but feel for Isaac, as he's essentially fighting through hell for someone he knows deep down is just a ghost. So even though it's obvious Nicole is dead, a part of you wants to believe that she is alive, just the same as Isaac does. It's tragic, but also kind of beautiful in a way, and I thought it was handled very well. I'll admit though, I didn't care much for the ending stinger, where an evil-looking hallucination of Nicole seemingly attacks Isaac. It feels like the same trope every horror media does, where they leave a stinger that the evil isn't really defeated after all, and it's really overplayed. Though I'm definitely willing to be more lenient on it, since they actually do something rather interesting with this stinger in Dead Space 2, so I won't be as harsh. Now, though I do have boundless praise for Dead Space, I do have a complaint, though honestly it's more of a nitpick than anything. Dead Space has a variety of weapons you can purchase and upgrade over the course of the game. Some can be rather unique and fun to use, such as the line gun and especially the Ripper, while others are absolutely atrocious like the flamethrower. However, how good the other weapons are don't really matter all that much because honestly, there's very little reason to use them. First, your default weapon, the plasma cutter, is already amazing. It does great damage and it's the only gun that can change the angle in which you aim, making it easy to hit Necromorph limbs. Second, ammo enemies drop corresponds to which weapons you currently have equipped. With your limited inventory space, odds are you'll fill up on ammo for all 4 of your weapons, likely leaving you to only have a little bit of ammo for each gun, which could leave you having not enough ammo for a weapon you desperately need to use. This is opposed to if you only have the plasma cutter, in which case you always have enough ammo for the gun you want, and plenty of it. Finally, you can find these power nodes around the Ishimura, which allow you to upgrade your suit, abilities, and weapons. With 4 weapons, it can be difficult to evenly spread out these power nodes. Meanwhile, if you just have the plasma cutter, you can more easily divide your upgrades while having one incredibly powerful weapon, instead of 4 less strong weapons. The point is, the default weapon is incredible, and in turn it can make using the others feel unnecessary. There's even an achievement for beating the game with just the plasma cutter, which is funny because doing so is just as viable, if not more viable, than playing through with the other weapons. So yeah, the plasma cutter probably could have been balanced a little better, but it's a nitpick, as I've played through with both just the plasma cutter and while using other weapons, and I've had a great time regardless. Dead Space is an incredible game. I would even dare call it a masterpiece. Dead Space is a game that I struggle to find any faults with, and the ones I do find is really just me scraping the bottom of the barrel. The story, atmosphere, visuals, and gameplay all hold up amazing, and if you enjoy horror games even a little bit, you owe it to yourself to give Dead Space a try. It will be very little surprise after all my praise for this game that Dead Space will take the number 1 spot at the very top of my ranking. I love Dead Space so much, I could replay this game an infinite amount of times and never find myself getting bored. Dead Space truly was, and still is, something really special. On the date this video is uploaded, a remake of Dead Space will have been released. I haven't kept up with any of the trailers or gameplay previews, and honestly, I don't think I'll ever care to play it. I won't speak to the game's quality one way or another to avoid horribly dating this video, but regardless whether you consider the remake awful, incredible, or somewhere in between, the fact is, a Dead Space remake feels unnecessary. Sure, Dead Space 2008 doesn't have those next-gen visuals, and don't get me wrong, for what I've seen, the remake is visually impressive, but the original still holds up immaculately, and there's not really anything about the game that feels dated or in need of being remade. Dead Space 2008 is a game that holds up beautifully, and will always hold an important place in my heart. It's definitely going to be difficult to find a game that will top Dead Space, at least for a while, but we're still going to try. Next time, we'll be taking a look at everyone's favorite wall-crawling superhero, but this time an important foe will be coming along for the ride. The game in question actually had 3 different versions, of which I own 2, so we'll actually be having a bit of a double feature when it comes to our old pal Spidey. Please look forward to that. In the meanwhile, what do you think of Dead Space? Any thoughts on the remake compared to the original? Let me know in the comments. Regardless, thank you so much for watching. Take care, and may we see each other again when we turn to the next chapter in the Tome of Silver.